Hello and welcome to episode 354 of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, where we talk about how the world of work and our attitudes to work are changing. I'm Pilar Orti from Virtual Not Distant, and with me, like around this time every month, is...
It's Maya Middlemiss from Remote Work Europe. Good to be back with you, Pilar, and everybody listening.
So we are recording on the 21st of March 2024. And before I forget, I just want to say that after many years of polishing our audio for us, Ross polished our audio for the last time an episode ago, Ross Winter, and I just wanted to thank him.
Yeah, thank you, Ross. You've worked on a lot of my shows as well over the years. I'm wishing you great success in your future ventures.
Yes. So, the main reason for that is the income for Virtual Not Distant has reduced greatly because I'm not taking on clients, and I discovered that I love editing, so I might as well take care of the whole production process myself. But yes, Ross, thank you very much for, we were figuring out it might be like, I don't know, I've known him for almost 10 years as well, so it's a little bit crazy. So yes, thank you very much, Ross Winter. Now, today's episode, which is another kind of what's going on episode, and actually, talking of relationships, we're going to talk about what we're doing and what we're hearing other people do about building relationships, making new contacts and strengthening those relationships. And Maya's been doing lots of that. And helping other people do lots of that, which is great. And in today's episode also, we also have a guest voice here today, just the voice, not the person. And that is the voice that belongs to Matt Ballantine. And he was a guest in this show some time ago on the 28th of February 2019 in episode 191, when he was talking about collaboration in organizations. And actually, I was looking at the show notes, Maya, and Matt was doing the segment, The Voice Behind the Blog. And it's when we used to have a section on tools, and we were talking about Google Docs.
That's going to be quite big, I think, Google Docs. I'm sure we saw that coming in 2019.
So I looked at it, I went, oh, wow, that's yes, I would never think of like dedicating any space to Google Docs. It's like... let's dedicate a segment to the computer. Anyway, Matt, I met him on Twitter, and in a bit, you're going to hear him talking about an experiment that he's been running for a while now. But I think, Maya, I'm going to maybe ask you, because of course it's great to have these moments to catch up, about an event I saw that you were doing, and I cut and pasted the text which said, Queens of the Network, Maya Middlemiss and Ali Meehan are holding a speed networking event. And that was on 29th of February. What was this about?
Well, I've known Ali for a long time. She runs the Costa Women Network, which started as a face-to-face thing down in Andalusia. And she now works with women all over Spain who are in various kinds of business and freelancing. And she does coaching outside of that women-only space as well. And we got together because we had so many people in remote work Spain who are small business owners, or they're freelancers, or they would like to be. But we all know, those of us who've been in this space a while, that networking and making connections in the remote space isn't something that happens as easily or organically. You've got to be that little bit more intentional and deliberate about it. And there are different ways of doing that. Matt has a very particular way, which we'll hear about in a moment. We decided to do it much more simply and try and bring people together online. We literally just did it in a Zoom webinar, and we got everybody together, 30-second elevator pitch, who they are, what they do to help other people. We had a little bit of a briefing on how to actually do that, how to shape your message and get it across in the speed of the virtual elevator, and then into breakout rooms to discuss a little bit more detail, how people could help each other, how they could network. We got lovely feedback. It wasn't a huge group to start off with, because I think we ended up with about 6 different breakout rooms going on simultaneously in groups of 4 or 5. So it worked nicely, and we could time it and then mix people up and put them into different groups and so on. And I think everyone found it really valuable. We all made some new connections and contacts, and we're definitely going to do it again. So watch this space. It'll be in the Remote Work Europe socials when we come around to doing it again. I think we said we'd try and do it once a quarter.
That's a good time frame, actually, because once a month can feel a bit like you wouldn't want to go to all of them. But once a quarter...
And it was interesting, actually, because some people weren't quite sure what it was for, or, people who were maybe more used to a job type relationship where you meet people through your work and you have a specific thing in common, and a little bit of the whole kind of networking without an agenda, just coming along to share what you do and see what you have in common with other people. I had some people saying, because we had a small service charge, and people were like, who are the other people? Who will I meet? What will I get? Was from a very few people was the questions that were coming up. And so there's something about kind of being more open than that we need to communicate. I think the people who got the most out of it were the ones who didn't have any expectations about, are these people in my industry or in my area, or, and they just came along to share and also to hear and to listen and connect. And I know that there have been some synergies and collaborations coming out of that meeting in particular. And, it's lovely when things like that happen, but you can't predict them. You just have to kind of, it's like gardening. My kind of gardening, you just throw the seeds and the fertilizer together, and then hopefully something pretty happens.
Yeah. I think from hearing you say that, and from other stuff I've been thinking about, I wonder whether these kind of events, it helps if the mindset we come to them is, rather than, am I going to make new contacts? That kind of thing, whether it's, am I going to build new relationships? Am I going to make new relationships? I think that word relationships is just softer and has less expectations, and it's more open in itself.
Yes.
So
it's more qualitative as well. I think it's this kind of, what am I going to get? But what am I going to be open to? And that might change things in ways you can't predict or measure. And that's the most serendipitous, happy outcome, hopefully.
Yeah. I have to say, I would probably be one of the ones that I didn't do any open networking events in person and online, because I always want like a focus. I like to network, as in to meet new people and things like that, around something that is more specific, as in the focus is not on me building relationships, but on attending something else, and then you build it. But some people are really great at just turning up and building those relationships. I think
Ali's brilliant at it. I think I feel a bit jaundiced, I suppose, especially the other side of lockdown, that so many people had these sort of online meetings. Oh, another one, and what's the point, and what's the agenda? I probably wouldn't have thought this would be a great thing to organise, but having done it once and seen the outcome, I think there is definitely a space for it. And maybe it's just the fact that it is online, and it's an hour of your time when you're probably not doing anything earth-shattering anyway. It's not like going to a business breakfast where you've got to like set the alarm and put something smart and go and, and then you have to do that speed networking thing and shaking hands and swapping business cards that we remember from another era of business. You can't replicate that online. It has to be more fluid, a bit more spontaneous, and a bit more. We had somebody there who was on a mobile walking a dog and dropping in and out. And, it was nice. It had a more sort of laid back, chilled, getting to know people from different parts of the country, different sorts of businesses. What do you do?
After you were telling me about this, I looked around and I remembered that Lisette Sutherland from Collaboration Superpowers, that she's been running some virtual co-workings, and she does them slightly different. They are still, I think the focus is not just on meeting people, but also on finding a space that motivates you to work. So the focus is slightly different. How she explains it, she says it connects professionals from around the globe, allowing them to work together even when miles apart. If you're seeking a productive, motivating and connected work experience from the comfort of your own space, what you were saying, then virtual co-working is the way to go. And then I was just checking. I haven't been to any of them. I know she's been running them for a while, but I checked out how she runs them. She has 10. So she says, come with a straightforward task or a list of tasks you want to complete. They go on butter.us, which is a platform that facilitates virtual collaboration. And then apparently they use the Pomodoro technique. during it. And they start with a 10-minute check-in. They begin with introductions, share what they'll be working on. Then they have 3 30-minute focus sprints where people just go and do the work. There's a 5-minute break, and then there's a 10-minute checkout at the end. So where they celebrate progress and talk about what they did. So that's another way of connecting online.
It sounds quite fun. I've never been to any of those kind of events, and I know that personally my work and productivity style, it would not be a fit. Why would I want my webcam on when I'm trying to do some work? And I don't like Pomodoros. If I'm in the flow, I don't want timers going off and things like that. And for me, it's not a great technique, but I absolutely know it works well for many people. And yeah, I think it's a great idea as a bridge between if you want to work from home and get stuff done, or do I go down to the co-working somewhere in between that where you can get a bit of that vibe and sociability and accountability. I think it's a lovely idea. Maybe it's something we should look at in Remote Work Europe to offer and see if people like it. It's been on my kind of explore one day maybe list, maybe because I know it's not a fit for me. I've kind of resisted it, but perhaps I should open my mind to how it might suit other people more and give it a go.
Yeah, it's the other. Maybe someone else can host it for you, and then you don't have to go through it.
Yes, I'll do the Zoom and things like that, and somebody else can do the check-ins.
Yes, I'm thinking that this could be. I mean, organizations are always thinking about ways of, increasing a sense of belonging with their people and getting people together, and different ways of people supporting each other without working on the same things together. And I think organizations could do more of these as well. I don't think this is something that's being done, because in some, it could either be across the organization, some people from different teams. It's not like a meeting. You just come together. It's like going into the cafe in a company, or even larger teams as well that have very independent tasks that they're just getting on with. And I think, again, it's not for everyone, like we're saying, but if you're worried about that, instead of bringing everyone to the office, maybe have some of these sessions. So let's now listen to why don't we get listeners to listen to Matt, who, well, he tells you who he is at the beginning. He's done a beautiful piece that we don't have to top and tail it at all. So actually, let's just pass you over to Matt, who's going to explain what he's doing to build relationships.
Hello, I'm Matt Ballantine. I am a technologist, a sociologist, one of the hosts of the WB40 podcast. I make card decks. I'm a dad. And my day job, when I get round to it, is as an engagement manager for a software development business called Equal Experts. At the start of 2023, I began an experiment in being intentionally unintentional, a thing called 100 coffees. The idea behind it was to explore what was going on as we work in this increasingly hybrid world, and particularly how we go about building relationships with people that we know and people that we don't know when we don't have the serendipity of being in the same physical spaces nearly as much as we used to. The aim behind it was to set myself the target of having 100 coffees with 100 different people over the course of 2023, and to see what happened. I had this kind of hunch that something interesting might happen if I did that, and that was as well framed as the experiment was, really. It come about, though, because we've been having conversations about, as a relationship-led business, what that meant in a hybrid world where, prior to the pandemic, an awful lot of our work was done on-site for clients, and that wasn't happening. And they felt that there was this increasing disconnect, and particularly because meeting time with people, the interesting liminal parts of meeting with people when we're in the physical world are often stripped out into indivisible, fungible units of outlook time, where you don't have any pleasantries, you don't have the walk to or from the meeting room, you don't have the chat for coffee afterwards. It's just supposedly the important part of the meeting, but that often feels like it's very not important at all. Having done 100 coffees, and I completed that in about September, this has now become part of my sort of, I guess, general working practice, I've been a big advocate of working out loud for many years. So there's practices in that kind of space that I do. And 100 coffees has become metaphorical both in the coffee sense, because it wasn't ever necessarily about having coffee to drink, and actually the 100 part has become sort of metaphorical now. And as I record this, I think I'm up to 145 of them now. The process, as much as it exists, I regularly just put a note out on social networks to say I'm interested in meeting people for coffee. I have a calendar management tool that enables people to find coffee slots in periods of an hour. We can either meet in person or online. And when the meeting happens, there's no agenda. There's just to see where the conversation takes us. And after the coffee, I've got into the habit of maybe up to a day after the actual meeting, writing some reflective notes of the things that we discussed. And it's not necessarily an accurate representation of everything that we discussed. It's just to try to be able to call out the things that I held in my mind from the conversation 12, 24 hours after the conversation has happened. And those are published on my blog. And I also keep a slightly silly spreadsheet of some of the numbers associated with this in terms of the sectors that people work in, or whether they're employed or self-employed, whether they're men or women, or if whereabouts in the world they were. Actually, going into the experiment, I was interested primarily in meeting people in person, and it was trying to be able to break myself out of my comfort and possibly laziness of spending a lot of time in my office at home. What I found quite quickly, though, was that limiting it to only in-person coffee meetings seriously limited the number of people that I might be able to meet. And so I actually started to do it online quite quickly soon as well. And interestingly, whilst there have been many meetings that I've had in coffee shops where I've thought this would be so much better on a Zoom call because I might be able to hear what it is the other person is saying, I've never had the feeling of any of the online coffees that it would have been better in person. And I think if you can get attention from people and give attention to people, being online or being in person is much of a muchness. I think there's a lesson out of that for how we have meetings, and increasingly ever distractible ways of working mean that we're not really present in anything in particular. If it's just you, one other person, no agenda, so you have to be present for the conversation. You can't just watch as other people talk. You are giving undivided attention, and that's where the basis of building relationships really starts. Of all the people that I met in the first 100, and it kind of continues on these sorts of proportions, about 60% of people were people that I knew, about 40% of people were people that I didn't know at all before, so my network has extended out as a result of that. I've learned loads of things that from conversations that I just wouldn't have otherwise had. That's been really interesting. But it's also at a bigger level, it's really opened up some interesting challenges I think that we face within the world of work, which is that the things that we need to be able to do to be able to foster relationships in a hybrid world of working, people will find it very difficult to do because they don't feel like work. Going for coffee for an hour without agenda, so no measurable outcomes from that hour of time, feels like an act of almost corporate disobedience in 2024. And I think in part, interestingly, that's powered through some quite deep cultural views that we have, certainly in the UK, about what work is and what it isn't. And I think what we see is actually the vestiges of what Weber described, the sociologist Weber described as the Protestant work ethic, and how in Victorian and early 20th century times, where people were much more religious, in Protestant religions, it was often seen that hard work was part of your route to heaven, and that enabled people to justify a whole load of unpleasantness with work. And, you know, at the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, lots of work was dangerous, it was physically arduous, it was proper sufferance, and often people died early as a result of all of that. And if you could turn that into a religious justification of, well, working hard means you get to heaven, that kind of, it was almost maybe a confidence trick that goes on. The vestiges of the Protestant work ethic about we feel guilty if we find ourselves enjoying ourselves at work are still very deep within our culture. But because to a great extent we've lost the religion, we don't really understand how any of this stuff sits together at the moment. But if you ask people, they find it actually often quite emotionally difficult to be able to free up time to do stuff where they're not entirely sure what the outcomes will be. And that's, I think, a really interesting reflection. I see it also within the world of innovation and change, and I think similar sorts of dynamics appear in that world. I'm continuing the experiment. It feels like it's a valuable way of working, and I'll continue to do it until it feels like it's not a valuable way of working. I continue to meet new people. I continue to meet people that I know already and spend time just getting to know each other a bit more and being able to explore ideas and concepts. If nothing else, it can sometimes mean that you end up with a stack of new connections in your brain, not people connections, although that as well, but logic connections and patterns in your brain that you otherwise wouldn't have made. Give you an example of that. Last week, one of my colleagues quite mysteriously said that we should meet for coffee in Piccadilly in London. I didn't know why that was. When I turned up, he took me to the Royal Geological Society, which is on Piccadilly, next to the Royal Academy of Art. And we spent 20 minutes or so having a conversation as we went around the library of the Royal Geological Society, looking at a small exhibition of fossilized dinosaur bones, because it was a commemoration of 200 years since these bones, some of the first that were identified as being those of dinosaurs, were found in the UK in the 1820s. And that was really interesting because it then got us talking about a whole bunch of metaphors around societies and that kind of the Victorian age of having these grand buildings with grand libraries. It got us talking about how with just a small fragment of bone, paleontologists could construct an entire skeleton, extrapolating out what they saw from a few small finds, and how in the world of technology in which we work, things like business analysis have a similar sort of role to play. It just got us thinking in different ways. It got us different input, and it enabled us to have a conversation that was rich, rewarding, will stick in the mind because of our location and what we did as a result of it. So very much more than just coffee. So 100 Coffees continues. If you're interested in taking part in it, I've got this Calendly thing. It's at calendly.com/Matt-Ballantine. Hopefully Pilar will put that onto the show notes for this show. I'd love to have coffee with you if you're up for it, and we can do it either somewhere in the London area or somewhere anywhere in the world through the magic of online video calls.
I love that.
Yeah, it was great. Yes. Also, because it's been fiestas this week, I'm fixating a bit on the idea of 100 coffees, because that should be about my daily average now. There is something very intimate and connecting over a drink. It's kind of like the opposite of the virtual networking thing that Ali and I did, where we go broad. I really like the idea of committing to just sit down with one person and really go a little bit deeper. And I love the kind of openness about it, to just anything could happen. You don't have an agenda, you don't have a point, you just have an open mind.
I think he's so brave, and every time, because I've been connected to him for such a while, for a long while, and every time I see like that Calendly link that is open to anyone, because it's also on his blog, I'm always like, are you crazy? Anyone can turn up. But, it's... well, he didn't tell us any horror stories, so obviously it's okay. And I'm going to see if I can book to go on London in person with him, because I haven't met him in person yet, and I think it would be rather nice.
You see, I think of you two as sort of in the same world, the same orbit, that you must have done that.
No, I think I know. I feel a bit like I should have met him in person, but I haven't. And I loved how he said that it was about attention, not location. That it's about you giving your attention. Especially as we know, like you say, it's easier to do with a one-to-one, but it is about how you're paying attention to the person. It's not about where you are, because you can be together in the same space and both minds be everywhere. And you can be online and you are completely focused. I thought that was a very interesting insight. So the final thing I wanted to say about Matt is that also the way he has been working out loud for ages. He's one of these people that's really embraced that concept since, I don't know, probably, I haven't known him that long, but it seems like he's been blogging for a very long time. And so the way that he amplifies and builds the network further by sharing something about these coffees with everyone. It's a way of you could almost say, if you read those blogs every time he has a coffee, you're tapping into his network in some way. You get to know him better, but also you start to tap into it. So I think I really like this. Yeah, I really like what he does. Yeah, Matt Ballantine.
Yeah, it's a real kind of synergy of who he's meeting, then filtered through him to you. We don't all have to go and have coffee together, actually, but we might sort of meet someone a little bit peripherally and think, oh, I want to actually meet that person properly or connect with them or send them a LinkedIn request or whatever.
I think that is definitely another thing about people connecting in organizations, that it's not always about bringing everyone together, but about finding other ways of weaving these webs, if you will, across. Okay, so Matt Ballantine, if you're a podcast listener, which I imagine you are if you're listening to this, his show is WB40, and really lovely as well. I mean, I interviewed him for Adventures in Podcasting, I think about a year ago, and he explained how he's built all this community around the podcast. And now there's a few co-hosts now. Used to be him and a colleague, and now they've got other co-hosts. So, I mean, we could talk about podcasting as a way of building relationships as well. We could but we've done that. I've met so many people through the show, and I know people who've opened their shows to network, not just to get their voice out there. So it's a very specific thing, isn't it, podcasting, though?
Yeah, but again, it's one of those things that's kind of, it's very much without an agenda, in the sense that you're putting it out there and you've no idea even who's listening, never mind what you're going to get back. And when you do get a message from a listener or somebody connects with what you're saying, and then you have that weird parasocial asymmetric thing where they know you from your podcast.
Yes. And if you have guests, I've got people like Marcus Wermuth, who I've mainly talked when we record. We have also met of Mike, but again, it's a very specific thing. But I recommend it to anyone who wants to podcast, of course. I did want to add one thing about experiments, because I did during the pandemic what was called the cafe around the corner, where I just invited some people to come and just hang out on Zoom for an hour, and at the beginning especially to experience, to share. It was across the globe, so everyone was sharing what they were experiencing then. And again, it was closed. So I think it's also interesting, this building relationships spontaneously and opening up your circle versus building them in your circle. And really just saying, well, I'm going to curate the groups and I'm going to curate the conversations and who I have them with. And again, I think a balance of that, I imagine, is good. It reminds me as well of the research into closed groups, so private groups versus open groups that Witzke did last year, about how it's a very different experience of the kind of conversations you have in a closed group, and one that, especially if you are bringing people together, that you're more comfortable in, and there's more of a sense of privacy rather than the more open groups where people don't know where other people have come from as well. I think it's that sense. I prefer the private bits. I'm not very good with strangers. I much prefer to know who I'm with.
Yeah, it's a kind of introversion, extroversion thing, maybe, that it's easy to open up with. There's got to be trust as well, I think, if you're really going to share your ideas and be a little bit vulnerable. Some people are very good at doing that in a very public way, and just being, bleeding onto the page or whatever in a very authentic way that just makes me think, oh God, no, I could never do that, I couldn't even do that in a journal to myself, never mind on a blog or something. And other people, it's what you're comfortable with, I suppose.
But I think that that's another thing that always, I think when the word networking, maybe it's just me, when the word networking comes up and networking events, I always think, oh, it's strangers, but actually you can also go to networking events where you know the people already. Networking is not just about meeting new people, but about consolidating also those relationships. And one of the ways in which we can be doing that is in online communities that either are private or open, or there's a selection process for bringing people in, or different kinds of things. I mean, there's all sorts. So how's Remote Work Europe going? I mean, we had quite a big chat about it some time ago, and you're doing lots of different things there.
Yeah, well, it's like we were saying about, it's just experimenting, really. It's still at the sort of top level, the social media level, it's completely open, and we're just welcoming all comers. They're public groups on Facebook, and we want to just get quality information and opportunities and podcasts and things like that out to people to help with their remote work journey. Yes, it's growing very fast as a community. We've got, I think we've got about 8 country groups now, but some of them are very small, very new. So they're just starting to try and get the word out, try and grow. We're hoping to bring on some more country groups soon. And that is completely open. And then at the other extreme, we've got Remote Work Europe Connected, which is the private premium community, and that is very small and closed. So that is obviously where people can bring their more personal questions and dilemmas, and we can work. We talk about people's branding and positioning and shaping their offers and things like that at the other end of the spectrum. And then it's great to see that happening in the connected community, and then people bringing that back out into the wider community and say, well, look, here's my new website, and I know a bit of the history of how that developed in the more private groups. So it's lots of different layers of online community. And just like you were saying with the cafe around the corner, sometimes there's some kinds of processing and growing you need to do in a more private, smaller space.
So from the relationship building and the community then, is it more about the supporting each other to find that work and to navigate through that work?
Yeah, we've got a nice community growing in the Spain group, I suppose, because I moderate it really tightly and I kick people out if they're at all kind of horrible to anybody. That the people we've got there's lots of people who are very supportive, who are very knowledgeable, because a lot of people come in with the questions about the rules on tax or freelancing and things like that. And it's reached the point now where I don't have to answer everything. It's great. There are people who actually will give a good answer and it will jump on other people who don't, or who give misinformation and so on. So there's a lot of good networking in that sense, of people really supporting each other. I think there's still sometimes a sense that I think people are afraid to say, I've got this great job or I've got this great opportunity, because they get 100 comments saying, do they want anyone else? Can you give me the name of the company? Can I do what you're doing? So we do let anonymous things through, and that makes it harder to build connection and community when people are anonymous. But at the end of the day, it is a public group. So if people are worried about putting stuff out there and who might see it, like a current employer or a family member or anything, we do support anonymous posting. So I want people to feel safe to engage on any level. And the people who get involved in the private community and Remote Work Connected, that's a very deep relationship building. There's some real friendships emerging there and potential professional collaborations as well. It's a really lovely community that people are really helping each other and giving, like feedback on somebody's latest blog or website or something. People are getting really in-depth support on that. And it's certainly not all coming from me and the team. It's really coming from within the community itself. So that's lovely to see.
I think this is. I mean, there is a big difference between belonging to a Facebook group and being part of an online community, as in, and the main. Oh, sorry, let me rephrase that. Belonging to a public online group. It doesn't matter if it's Facebook or LinkedIn, and being in a private community, because for exactly the reasons you're saying, if we were to take the the physical, the co-located equivalent. It's like going into a room and saying something when it's being broadcast and you don't know who's going to hear it, versus being in a room and just the people who are there are going to be involved in the conversation. And I think that we can look for because I think maybe some people have tried Facebook groups but have never been part of a closed online community, which is a very different experience. Then it's not about just, in the case of Remote Work Europe, if I understand correctly, then it's not just about I've come here to look for a job. It's actually I've come here because there are people in my situation, there are people I might learn from, there are people I might help, and you start to get that nice crossover. And then you can start to network and build relationships. So yeah, those parameters, I think.
Yeah, we've had some local stuff going on as well, like people saying, is anybody else in Barcelona? Let's do a co-working lunch and things like that and try and take it offline.
Yes.
Into building some relationships. And we're going to have a meetup in Valencia at the end of April.
Yes.
And just, these aren't designed for anything other than just social stuff at the moment. Whether we decide to do any online, more educational or informative events, that would be later. But I think it's reflecting that need as well, that people want to deepen a relationship offline sometimes. So yeah, even though we're all about remote work, it's all about the face-to-face stuff as well for the social element. So we're really happy to support and encourage that.
And there's that as well. It's the fact that just because something is online doesn't mean you can't take it in person. And just because you're in person, it doesn't mean that you can't. And hopefully now there is that fluidity. The same as with the synchronous and asynchronous things. It's about mixing and seeing what helps you connect better. Yeah.
Yes. And you found a community I haven't heard of. I was just popped this link open, this Asynco.
Oh, yes.
Asynco.
Asynco.org. So this is something that I'm a part of. I joined in January, and it is, talk about mixing online with in person. A lot of these people, I think, know each other probably from years ago, from the world of communities of practice, online communities of practice, looking after the digital workplace, enterprise social networks. So a lot of them come from that part of the world of work. And I met some of them through Ana Nieves, who was on the 21st Century Work Life podcast, I think 2 years ago, talking about knowledge management in organizations. And she runs the Social Now conference, which, by the way, everyone, I'm just going to click on the link. Oh, hang on. Can you open it?
Yes, I've got it. So that's in Lisbon in May.
Yes, which dates?
The 16th, 17th of May.
Excellent. So there's still time to grab your...
Yes, is early bird pricing still available?
And again, that's a conference in Lisbon. And I know, for example, Samit is talking in there. He's built his network basically on LinkedIn. And now he's going to be in Lisbon talking about asynchronous communication. And a lot of these people are in the Asynco community. It's very, at the moment... I was going to say it's very small, but it depends how small. I don't even know how many people. There are quite a lot of people. And it's very private community. A lot of the conversations take place asynchronously. The container is Mighty Networks. And then there's community of practice meetings once a month. So there's meetings once a month. Luis, who's the community manager, because there is someone who is a community manager there, he helped me organize a session to talk about the process of writing the time management book. So I like doing that. Again, I preferred for there to be a topic rather than turn up just to talk, because just preference. So it's a very interesting community, very specific profile of person as well. So if anyone is interested in joining, let me know, pilar@virtualnotdistant.com, and I can tell you more about it. But yeah, it reminds me a bit of the early days when Lisette and I set up Virtual Team Talk. And that was another thing, is that before, there didn't used to be so many online communities, and we both had our podcasts, and we were meeting lots of people, but we couldn't find one place to find them in, because now you can find everyone on LinkedIn, but then you couldn't. And so we created this container, which was a Slack, and that's where people would come in. And I think it's a bit slower, that community now. But yeah, at the beginning, it was small enough that we could organize meetings and we started to know each other. And again, a lot of the people who joined that community had met in, I don't know if Germany or somewhere, at a conference. So I think that's also building when you start to build, or even if you join, when you join a community, it's easier if you know someone already.
Yeah, it's just like going into a face-to-face event or something. If you're somebody across the room that you recognize, and and they can introduce you to the other people, and you're not a stranger anymore. But it's nice. I remember that from years ago, you bringing me into that Slack, and it's still going.
Yeah.
It's one of the few Slacks that I haven't signed out of because it's quiet, it's very asynchronous, it's very peaceful. People share little nuggets and events and things in there, and it's always worth keeping an eye on. There's a lot of people in there, but I think it's very peaceful.
The thing with Slack now, and this is also something that bothers me about some online containers. I'm going to call them containers because they're not like Slack is not an online community. It's the people in there that make that.
Yes.
Is that I don't think you can leave a Slack anymore. I think someone has to deactivate your account.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So
you sign out of the app, but you're still there.
You're still there.
Ghost.
Yeah. And it really bothers me because if I've got all my notifications out, I know I'm signed into Slacks that I can't get out of, and I can't be bothered to tell the person.
That's just made me think, how many Slacks am I in? I don't remember, or that somebody's invited you to, and you think, I'll have a look, but I'm not really going to do anything with this. So you leave, but you're still there.
And that's another thing when I remember with Virtual Team Talk at some point having conversations with a handful of people saying, can't we kick out people who haven't been around for a while? But there's always the thing that, maybe people come in and out. Some people don't post, but they're getting value and they're still there. And it's always very tricky that.
It's tricky. We have this even in Remote Work Europe Connected, which is paid. There are people who've paid like 4 months ago and never said a word.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, are they in it for the discounts on the training and products? Well, okay. And I can't kick them out for not interacting because it's optional. Some people maybe want to lurk, or maybe they've forgotten and the subscription's just going out. So I don't know whether to kind of contact them and say, are we not meeting your needs in some way, which might just make them unsubscribe, or it might make them feel they're doing it wrong, or so. And there shouldn't be a doing it wrong. Whereas I know there are other people who are being quite vulnerable in there and getting very insightful, personalized feedback from other people, but they're aware that there's these other people on the member list and who they've never heard anything from. Maybe you sort of wonder, are they reading this? It's very asynchronous, so there's no notifications. This is Circle, and it's very peaceful, very async. And so, you don't know unless somebody deliberately interacts with a piece of content, whether they've seen it or not. So yeah, it is a bit strange that there are people in there who I don't know. And
that's the issue with these asynchronous conversations in these spaces, is that at least if you're in a room and you're having a conversation, even if someone's not saying something, but you can see them and see whether
see if they're listening,
or get some feedback from their body language. But like this, it's just like you even in closed spaces, you can still get the sense of who's listening. So yeah, all these things. It's very multi-layered with as much as humans.
That's what community means these days, I suppose. It's different things in different contexts and different moods and need states and so on.
Yeah. So then I suppose it's worth going into the big place where you can try and build and strengthen your relationship, which is the world of social media, which is so huge now, as in the number of users everywhere. And I suppose if we're looking at professional relationships, LinkedIn I'm going to put a question mark here, is the place to go?
Yeah, it works, LinkedIn. It can be noisy, it can be cringy. It's still, for me, it's a really great source of information of what's going on with events and things like that, what's going on with people's launches. I suppose in terms of, remote work news and conferences and events, newsletters, podcasts, there are things that you hear about something new on LinkedIn and it's not in your podcast feed yet because it's new. And So it's good that it shows up there, I think. And, we know certainly for people that we're trying to help find remote work, it's really important that even if they're not really, really active in terms of posting, that they've got to have a good profile. They've got to be there, because it's one of those things. If somebody Googled them and they're not, we try and make sure people have their LinkedIn profile really, really aligned with the jobs that they're seeking, because it's like that first glimpse of them that any recruiter's going to have. And so it feels like it's non-optional for remote work seekers. You've got to be on LinkedIn, whether you have to be there every day, whether you have to be a top voice or influencer or something, that's extremely individual. Yeah, we're doing our LinkedIn challenge again next month to try and take people into posting every day. And it's the third time we've done it. So, and I suppose the best reference is that we've got a couple of people coming back for their third time.
Oh, wow, nice.
Because it's that discipline of posting every day, of checking other people's posts out every day. But also we do a daily prompt just to give people ideas of what to post or what to think about. The prompts are completely optional, but it's just if you're having one of those, I have no idea what to share or so. And so it gives people a chance to think, or trying a different sort of post. If you always do a video, then do a text post or something like that. So, and by the end of it, I know that your analytics go up and you're getting more engagement. But no, it's always great fun because you get to know other people and really help them think about their strategy. Well, what are you trying to achieve here? Are you trying to grow your freelance business? Are you trying to become influential in something? Are you trying to pivot? Some people, it's about killing the thing they were known for and trying to develop a voice in something that might be in a bit of a different direction. And LinkedIn it's there. It's what, 100 million people or something. And so you might as well use it. Yeah, we'll have some fun on LinkedIn over the next month. And if anyone wants to join us, then
the link is in the show notes.
Link in the show notes. Hop on over, check us out. But we only get really nice people. So that's the final plug. You get to work with nice people, including me and Diana, who are hosting it.
Well, that's another way of building relationships, actually, is joining a challenge. Again, it gives you a focus. I think you done it as well, the book proposal challenge by Alison Jones, which she just hosts in a Facebook group, I think, still. And over those 2 weeks, you're there every day. You're doing your thing. I mean, you're there. You're mostly not there to build relationships, but you're there to do something. And in doing that, you build some contacts, you learn from other people, you give, and it's a nice way of building a relationship.
Yeah. And you share about, we do it in a Facebook group as well, even though it's on LinkedIn, we do the actual prompting and,
that's funny.
Connecting, sharing links on Facebook. And so in the Facebook group, then you get the more sort of personal, or you get people asking questions or saying, I'm trying this is a bit different, experimental, and getting feedback on it and things like that. And by the end of it, you really do build a relationship. And I think because you've been on that journey together, with Alison's, it's a week, isn't it? So you're working on your proposal on your 2 weeks, and that's quite intense when you're building a thing. And I think it's quite powerful that even though it's your unique proposal or your unique LinkedIn profile, you're doing it alongside other people.
Yeah,
it's like that idea of a walking meeting, that you're sort of on your own journey, but you're facing in the same direction together. Yes. So it's very supportive, even though it's a personal journey. So I can see why these things work. And maybe we need them more in remote as well, because we're not sort of sat in the office together or whatever. It's a way of connecting with people, maybe in a different country or a different planet, a different world, professionally or something. But your journeys still line up for a short time, and you have that sort of brief, intense doing a thing together, like people meeting on the Camino de Santiago or whatever.
I think that common purpose definitely for me is really important too, because then I don't have to worry about anything else. I don't have to talk about anything else, just that common purpose. And that's how I'm meeting the person. It's a bit like a work relationship for me.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm still on LinkedIn, but something I really, really am very uneasy about is the fact that the algorithm is curating my relationships on LinkedIn, because there's certain people that I don't see their things anymore. I just know. And also, I know my own posts get very few impressions, like nothing. It's not even that people like it or not. It's just, it's not reaching. What I'm saying and asking and sharing is not reaching people. But also I don't like that it's curating what I see. I'm starting to, with social media, I'm also starting to just be a bit more careful with that because I don't want an algorithm to curate my network. But,
it's just the way that the whole social thing has gone, isn't it? It's like, here's all this noise. Here's a huge group of people. Now we're going to filter it for you.
Yeah.
Or we're going to tell you what you should see. And even, I suppose TikTok's the ultimate.
But TikTok is not a social media.
No, but it's that kind of idea of there's all this feed out there and we're going to show you the one thing that we think that you ought to get rather than give you any sense of what's happening out there and what the general buzz is. Because on Twitter, you can still at least get the trending topics and things like that if you want to understand what's going on about something, even if it's opening up in the For You or whatever it's decided you want to see. And obviously, Facebook's been like that forever. It's just been what they think they're going to show you.
Well, I'm part of the Independent Alliance of Authors group. And when I joined, I thought that they had a forum, which I was really looking forward to because it's a closed thing. But they were on Facebook as a group and it was closed. And they've had to move to Mighty Networks because of the way that Facebook was basically saying, if you want some of these posts to be seen by everyone, you need to pay or something like that. So I just think it's important to continue. I mean, we can continue using these social media tools, but just to be aware if we are using them to build relationships, what is behind it?
Absolutely. And it's, at the end of the day, if we're still using them for free, we're there. We're a product. We're the eyeballs for Facebook's advertisers and their poor starving shareholders. And at the end of the day, they're going to show us what's going to be most profitable for them and keep us there longest. And if we want control over it, we have to go and pay. And I'm sure that the Alliance of Authors is paying to use Mighty Networks in the same way that we're paying for the Circle platform for Remote Work Europe Connected, because it gives us complete control then over what people see. And we're not trying to play games or figure out the algorithm or trying to work out what will get engagement and things that we have to do in these public spaces is a completely different conversation. And it does make it much easier to build relationship if you can get people there in the first place, because, Facebook still has 2.5 billion people on it. That I wish we did have 200 billion in Remote Work Europe Connected. But we never will. It will always be like the very top of the funnel for the people who come into your private world then. And I suppose I'm sure it's the same with an authors group. It's going to be people that it's very much invitation only and curated, and
well, it's membership
filters there. So you're paying as the gatekeeper, and that means they can create a very special, private, safe place for you that's not full of ads or somebody else telling you what you should pay attention to. And I'm sure there's room for both, but we have to try and figure out where each community fits on that spectrum somehow.
Exactly. I think when we're looking for places to network, we've got to know what that network or that relationship building means to us, what we want to get, and then make sure that if we're doing it online, we are in the right environment with all of these things. Right. Well, I think that we've gone, I don't know how much more there is that we can cover around what's going on in networking in the 21st century. But I did want to just touch on, I do want to touch on, this is going to be a bit strange, on the role of what the role of generative AI can be in all of this, because it's really interesting because I was talking to my husband the other day and he was saying about, how these chatbots could be used to tackle loneliness by people who are lonely and don't have many friends or many people to talk to. And I do remember that OpenAI had a survey some time ago asking people what they used it for. And this was one of the things that you could tick a box. And of course, it's one for the other. You don't want people who are lonely to be stuck with the bot. But then again, if people are lonely and all they can talk to is the bot, then might not be work.
Talking is good, and it's not always easy to find the right people to talk to.
Exactly.
Think of the waiting list for the NHS for talking therapies and things like that. If there is the right AI tool that can give people that space to self-reflect and so on without having to pay for a psychotherapist, then I'm sure there's space for it, for all these tools.
I wonder if we're going to see more how maybe it's already there. So listeners, pilar@virtualnotdistant.com, let us know if you know of any examples of generative AI specifically being used in mental health, because it could be, I'm sure it's already somewhere. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that, and then we'll just go and segue into our last calls to action, because we have a few things around generative AI to share. Do you want to tell us, Maya, about, well, it's actually a course you've got using generative AI, not for loneliness, but not for
loneliness, but maybe in ways that people weren't expecting, because it's one of the I was talking to some recruiters about use of ChatGPT and things like that. They were moaning about, oh God, if I see another cover letter that's written by ChatGPT about how somebody's elevating their career in
and
these
delving
days
into
and all of that to unlock and it's obviously there are lots of people using it very badly, but so I was interested in looking at ways how people can use these tools to really help them position themselves for a new remote job, because not everybody can. Again, it's like the psychiatrist thing. Not everyone can afford a careers coach or a mentor to sit and help them with this stuff. So yeah, we dug into it. We did it as a live training course, and that's now available on demand, because the feedback we got from the live course was people really enjoyed it and they asking questions, but they kept wanting to stop and try stuff because we gave prompts for each section. It's like, well, test this out. See, obviously swap your own information in terms of your career and your history. And these are the tools you can use to research possible careers, to find leads, to research companies, to align your online profiles with what recruiters are looking for. And there were some things that were a little bit more like what you were saying about mental health interactions, such as we did role-playing interviews with ChatGPT was a really powerful one. And some people said, I didn't know you could use it like that. But originally these things were chatbots. They were designed to really have a conversation. And if you prompt it right with information about the role, and there's so many clues in the job description and so on as to what they might test, and then include your own information about your experiences and your motivations, you can get a really good role play going with ChatGPT, where it asks you questions and you give it the answers, then it gives you feedback on how that answer could be improved. And then you can go through that as many times as you like before your interview.
Yes.
And really perfect it. And the same at the other side of it, when you're negotiating your terms and conditions, even what you're going to get paid, because that's not always obvious in remote when you're being hired from another country and so on, how to create a really good case for yourself to be paid like a local employee, or how to negotiate that additional bit more remoteness than maybe they advertised in the first place. So it was a really interesting course, and it's so validating when people say, I've got an interview next week. This is just in time. And it's really putting this stuff into practice. So I'm very glad we did it. And it's all remoteworkeurope.eu/store. You can go and grab that course and have some fun with it ahead of your next career move. And if you've got an interview coming up, then you'll find all the prompts in there that you need to practice and get ready for it.
Excellent. And then, I would like to invite people to follow what I'm doing with generative AI as well over on spiralingcreativity.substack.com. And my latest post was about whether generative AI is an assistant, a young assistant, or a clown. Because after the conversation with Jen Riggins on AI and developers, where she said, well, the chatbot is just trying to tell you what they think you want to know, or tells you what you think you want to hear, and that's the clown. So I've got that post on it, and which we want to do.
It's a lovely name for your Substack. I love
the spiraling creativity.
That's great fun. But it is such an important point about these chatbots, and they're so good now that it's really easy to forget its limitations and what it cannot do, and that it's just basically a probabilistic thing. And yet it's like a sort of eager young intern who really wants to be liked, and it's trying to give you what you want to hear. And it might know stuff that you don't because it's eaten the internet, but it won't necessarily give you what would be the most helpful. And it's just summarizing what it's been fed.
Well, listeners, virtualnotdistant.com, we have a contact form there. Send us your comments. We'd love to hear from you. And remoteworkeurope.eu for all things Remote Work Europe. Maya?
Please come along and check us out. Remote Work Europe Connected. You can find all the links from the homepage there.
All right, listeners, thank you very much for listening. A big thank you for listening to the 21st Century Work Life podcast. We know there are many other shows for you to choose from. Remember to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, and you can check out the full show notes over at virtualnotdistant.com/podcasts. Talking of podcasts, we have another show you can listen to, Management Cafe, which you should also be able to find on all podcast apps. I have been Pilar Ortiz. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.